Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is Chase, and joining me today is Drew Eakins, marketing manager at Hestra Gloves. Thanks for joining me. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chase.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you reaching out. We'd talked, I think it was, I don't know, it was a few years ago. Maybe it was when you started in the position here in North America. Hestra is a Swedish brand. I don't know if you were getting involved in the very early days of the brand, like getting established here and in the States or what, but we initially connected then, and then you reached back out expressing some interest in getting involved with our students. So I appreciate that. And appreciate the time to just talk a little bit about your experience in the outdoor industry, how you got to where you are, lessons learned, all of that. So thanks for taking time.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to jump in. I have been around for a little bit now, and it's good to be able to share some of the things I've learned with folks who are trying to get into this industry we love so much.
Right. Did I get the timeline down? I guess we'll get into some of that, but was that early days of when you were working for the company?
Yeah, so I am about to hit my 3-year anniversary at Hestra, and so yeah, those were the early days of my tenure here, and yeah, at that point I was just trying to kind of reach out and make connections, and always good to meet new faces. So yeah, glad this is coming full circle here.
Yeah, totally. How did you, I guess we're going to go a little further back, but how did you initially break into the outdoor industry, or I guess how about the outdoors in general? Did you always have a connection to the outdoors, to the outdoor industry, outdoor products?
Yeah, so I have a kind of a unique background. My dad was a recreation major in college, and one of the few people who I know who majored in recreation and then pursued a job in recreation as well. And I feel like in an era now where we are so multifaceted, he's pretty unique. But he jumped into a job with the state park system in Georgia, which is where I'm from, and spent 31 years of his career stewarding people through the outdoors, running parks and overseeing all the operations there. So I grew up on the biggest state park in Georgia, and had about 10,000 acres as my backyard. So my brother and I lived on the park with my parents, and we had full reign. So we had lakes and ponds and forests and trails, and we just had access to so many of the niceties of the natural surroundings there in South Georgia. So really, really lucky. And kind of conversely, my mom was in marketing as her career. So I like to say I've been the complement of my two parents, kind of mix those things together and created a job.
What was it in those days that you like realized that working in the outdoor industry could be a career, or did that come along later?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty natural thing for me, just being surrounded by people whose jobs were in the outdoors. It never occurred to me that wasn't a thing, or that was something that I would have to go and kind of create. My dad had done it for his entire career. And so day in and day out, we saw him engaging with campers and hikers and people who were in for the day, and really seeing people come alive when they got out of the city and got out of their daily grind and spent some time kind of taking a deep breath and enjoying nature. So it really was like from day one, understanding that this is a viable, feasible kind of career path. And then I just had to find my own way within that.
Right. So when did that first opportunity present itself to work in the outdoor industry? How was that transition?
Yeah, I actually went to college thinking I was going to get into professional sports. And so I was a sport management major. I was thinking, pro sports at a high level, and even went on to do my master's and worked in the NFL for a little bit, worked with an MLS club, and then kind of realized that wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be personally. And so my wife and I decided to move to Colorado, and I was lucky enough to get a chance in the climbing industry with a nonprofit there. And they took a chance on me. I had no relevant experience, and lucky for me, they hired me and gave me a chance. But yeah, so that was about 10 years ago now.
Well, it really seems like I feel like that experience is pretty common, right? There's like no real direct pathway into the industry. I know our program, we're trying to create that, right? This career, like this pathway, a trajectory for a student to go from, a degree program right into a career. your pathway seems more common, right? Where it's someone gives you a chance and you break in that way. What were some of those lessons learned in like those early days, just getting into the industry? I mean, you had been surrounded by it, working in parks, and growing up in that environment, but what felt different going from sport to like the true outdoor industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so sports is an entertainment industry, right? And you're talking about a product that is simultaneously created and consumed. And so it's all about experience. And you're trying to work through, how do we create this experience? And how do we create connections with the experience we're creating, right? And when you transition into the outdoors, it's a little bit different, because those experiences are so hyper personalized, right? We're not all focused. Yes, we all may be hikers, bikers, skiers, runners, whatever the case may be, but those are individualized experiences. And so what we're trying to do is enable people to have those experiences. And for me, my first job in the industry was with the Climbing Wall Association, which was the trade association for the industry of indoor climbing. And so at the end of the day, our task was a little bit more similar to my sport background than my job now at Hestra is. So it was about, how do we equip these gyms, which are these centralized experiences, how are we equipping them to be successful and then to turn out a product that is safe and that is adhering to regulations and that is community building and skill building for the people who seek it out, right? And so I think it's really interesting, that kind of soft transition between sport, which is super entertainment driven, climbing gyms, and now being in the ski world. It's a very different animal. But I had a little bit of a soft handoff there, which is nice. And I'll say this: I encounter people a lot who have my same trajectory, right? I come to the industry with maybe not as many relevant background or skills as I think I need. And I think there's this transition that's happening, and you guys are spearheading this effort, right? It's, how do we put those skills in the context of the industry? How do we build authenticity around me as a person who has a passion for these things, but also has the aptitudes and the skill set to work in the business of these things I'm passionate about? And a lot of times what we see in the outdoor industry historically is people who are come, and if you're in the Facebook groups, if you're in the LinkedIn groups, if you're hearing from people at a general level, people are coming saying, hey, I really like hiking, I really like the outdoors, I want to get a job in the outdoors. And I think the question you really need to be asking is, what skills and what value do I bring to a brand who works in the outdoors, right? And the prerequisite is no longer just having that passion, but also having that passion and bringing value to the brand. And part of what you guys are doing is building up that value in your students. And as students, you need to understand, where is my value? What do I bring to the brand? Because I bring something to the table and the brand does as well. And how do we marry those two things together? And I think it's an interesting transition we're going through as we get a little more professional in what we do. And as the brands get bigger and more notable, how do we pair that like personal passion with that vocational passion? And I think that's the sweet spot that the outdoor industry exists in. And I would hate if we drifted too far in one direction or the other, because I think that's the beautiful thing about this industry, is we can really marry those two things together and create something that's really special.
Right. Totally. I completely agree. And we see a lot of students like in that first couple of years trying to figure out where they fit, or what that trajectory might look like for them. And a lot of them come in all passion, right? And they're still trying to figure out, what are the skill sets that I have? What are the skills that I want to develop as a part of this program? And some come into the program really having a passion, but not being interested in design or product, which is what we're all about. Maybe they want to play with the gear, but they don't want to make it. And that's where we realize, okay, maybe that's not a good fit. And we need to push you more of the services route. It sounds like you want to be out taking people out using equipment. And so we kind of act in that role of trying to funnel people in different directions and hopefully get them into that pathway. But I think it's interesting, right? It's like there's tons of roles outside of product that that we're not supporting, right? But there's plenty of roles within like finance or legal, or there's all these other angles of that to break into the outdoor industry if you have that passion coupled with like that really valuable skill set. So I think that's really great. I think it was interesting what you mentioned about like sport and the outdoors and kind of the differences between like an entertainment product and outdoor experiences. It was probably interesting for you to see in the Olympics, like climbing, right? Going through that, trying to figure out how to be an entertainment product in the Olympics, right? And how to
Yeah,
become a
absolutely.
spectator sport. And it is interesting. I wonder if we're going to see more of that. I mean, we've seen that with other Olympic sports that are traditionally outdoor, but I'm sure that was interesting for you to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting to see your sport because so after the climbing wall industry, I also worked with Great Trango Holdings, which is
Hmm.
the kind of parent company of Trango. They distribute Tenaya in the U.S., eGrips, the climbing holds. So really deep roots in the climbing industry. Been around for 20 plus years in Colorado, and so I have a lot of background, a lot of connections there, and it's really interesting to see this sport that we know and love become kind of part of a bigger stage and a grander stage. And I think there is a lot of kind of formalized competition within climbing, but to see it at that highest level that is the Olympics is really, really fulfilling and really interesting because you have to think about viewership, right? And viewership value. And we've seen deep water soloing become part of the key like spectator format as we search for ways to make it viewable and compelling from a viewership perspective. What do we do, right? And so somebody was like, all right, let's put a bunch of water under there and take the rope away, or let's make it speed climbing, or let's kind of tweak the format along the years to make it more viewable so that one, it's a commercial product, but even beyond that, it becomes something that people can get inspired by, and then you open up that participation to those people because they are now having the opportunities to consume media around climbing and see that at the highest levels and aspire to do that themselves, which has been really cool to see.
I love this sports marketing angle. I haven't really talked to anyone about it from this perspective. It's really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how that trickles down or affects the industry. I mean, we're kind of right in the middle of, I feel like, a lot of changes, especially with climbing hitting the Olympics. But
Absolutely.
I guess how we talked a little bit about how sport is more focused on the entertainment aspect. I guess what are some of the other unique components to marketing to outdoor consumers? Like if there's a student in our program that's interested in marketing for the outdoors, like what do you see as some of the unique aspects of that or challenges that you run into in your roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that the beauty of this job is, and any marketing job in the industry, is that you're enabling people to pursue their passions, right? And we know that it's well established. Being outside, being in nature, moving your body, all of those are positive things, right? So I've marketed things that are a lot harder to market than the outdoors, and have a lot of different narratives, right? And the beauty of what we do is that I can always feel like I am helping, enabling people to do the things they love to do, right? We sell gloves. So if I sell you a glove that stands up to the test of time, that keeps your hands warm and gives you good dexterity, then that means for the next 3, 5, 10 years, that product is going to allow you to do things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise, or to go longer, go further, go higher, go deeper, all of those things that we value so much and that give us life and our soul speaking for us. We're allowing people and enabling people to be able to do those things. So I think, at a basic level, it's really fulfilling in that way. And even from the product perspective, right? Like building products that are born out of those experiences and that have from the idea, inception phase all the way through creation are pointed towards doing something good and doing something that is going to help a lot of people do things that they maybe wouldn't be able to do otherwise, or do things in a more comfortable setting than they would be able to do otherwise. So I think that's really unique. The other thing is, in other industries that are bigger and a little more, I won't say competitive, but there are a lot of competitors in the same space. There's not a lot of shared interest, right? And there's not a lot of shared feedback between brands and things like that. And I mean, even just in the last week, I've talked to marketing people from O'Neill, Howler Brothers, Fjallraven, Scarpa, and we're all just kind going back and forth and sharing information. And I've talked to reps from Atomic and Solomon and our reps internally who rep other brands. And so there really is this community aspect to the industry. And as from a marketing perspective, we get to help build that and build community around products and community around the things that we all love together. And I think that's super unique and something that I always preach about, this industry, because it's so unique.
I guess along those lines, like what are some of the prerequisites or qualities that you want to see in someone who wants to work in marketing for the outdoors? You mentioned community. I imagine like one of those qualities is you need to be a community builder, right? And we could talk about what community looks like or how it's fostered, but like what are some of the qualities that you look for or in someone who wants to break into this space?
Yeah, well, I'm going to stop right here and give you a compliment because I see you doing that all the time. And I think you're doing a fantastic job of standing at the intersection of your students, the product at USU, but also the industry at large, right? You are reaching out and connecting, you're getting catalogs, you're building libraries, you're doing, getting speakers, all those things. And so, a compliment to you because you're doing that and you're a great example for your students. On the front end, I always consider a few things. So one, when I was in school and I was trying to figure out what's next and how do I become someone who is marketable and who is someone that a brand would want to hire, I had some advice from a professor that I remember to this day, and this was 10 plus years ago, but Dr. Sam Todd at Georgia Southern University, much credit to him, because he said, no matter what you do, as an entry-level employee, you're going to go in and there are going to be things you don't know, and don't let that be the obstacle. Yes, you have this education. Yes, you have whatever experience you have, but there's always, no matter how far you are into your career, but especially at the beginning, there are going to be things you don't know. And don't let that be an impediment. Go figure it out. Don't say, no, I can't do that. Say, I can go figure that out. And that's what I'm looking for in employees and in people on our team, is people who will take a little direction and run with it and figure things out. We have the biggest knowledge base in the history of humanity at our fingertips. It's called Google and YouTube and the internet. And so there are resources out there, and every day I am learning new skills through things I encounter on projects. So I'm the lone marketing person in North America for Hestra Gloves. And that means I wear a lot of hats, and I'm asked to do everything from graphic design to copywriting to high-level brand direction to budgeting. And so you better believe I am learning new things every single day, if not every single hour. And I never say I can't do something unless it is going to be detrimental to the brand for me to try. and learning to put those guardrails up has been valuable for me. But again, like back to the beginning, it's who can come in and say, yes, I will learn how to do that. Yes, I will figure it out. And I think that skill set, those soft skills, are much more important to me than the hard skills. Hard skills are important, but if I'm looking at two candidates, one who can work in the software that I want them to work in, and the other who has those skills that can connect people and who can build community and build rapport and trust, brands survive and fail on those things, on those soft skills and the ability to connect and build community way more than they do on, can I work in NetSuite or WordPress or HubSpot, right? Those things are not as important, and those things can be learned, right?
Right. Well, I'm curious, like your trajectory to Hestra. Are these things that you noticed within the company, and that was something that attracted you to the opportunity? Was the opportunity to, wear a lot of hats, or you saw the values of the company is fostering those things that you just talked about? Like, are those things that attracted you to that opportunity? Is that something that you look at when you're looking at companies? Like, how much are you interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, and you're looking for those types of things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a tendency on the front end of your career to really not interview companies that are interviewing you, right? And my job after the climbing ball industry was with Trango, and I met my contact there through them. Chris Klinke, who is still the president at Trango, is an amazing mentor. And he took me to lunch one day, and we started talking about job opportunities, and he asked me if I'd be interested. I said, yeah. Well, we had a conversation that day, and then over the next year and a half to the point of me coming on there. And by that point, we had all this like long timeline of working together vocationally, of being like building this friendship, of all these things. And I even told him at one point, I said, man, I'll do whatever it takes to get a job at Trango. I will come sweep the floors. And to his credit, he said, actually, I'm sweeping the floors in our warehouse right now. And that's the kind of leader he is. And I knew in that moment, that's a company I want to work for, because he's the president of the company. And he's saying, no job is too small for me. And he lives that out. And I learned to live that out through him. My first week on the job, I love to tell this anecdote because it's a microcosm of kind of my crash course in the industry and just vocation in general. My first week on the job, he said, hey, we got some new products and I need you to go take some product photos. Can you do that for me? I said, yeah, no problem. So I get the products, I go back to the studio. I call my brother and I said, hey, how do you turn on this camera? And what do these numbers mean? And I had literally never taken a real photo with a real nice camera in my life. And luckily I grew to the point where I could do those things and became the staff photographer and ended up doing some large scale, photography efforts for the brand. But he put me in that situation, and he probably knew I had no experience, but he said, I'm gonna put you in there. I'm gonna see what happens, right? And I said, yeah, let's do it, man. Let's let me figure it out. And yeah, it probably took way longer. And if you looked at the product photos over the year, they came a long way. But I knew that, and that was kind of the first step. The second step with Hestra was thinking about how does the brand speak to you and relate to you, right? And so my interview process with Hestra was a lot different, where I had a lot of questions, and I had grown in confidence in my skills and my abilities and knowing what my value was specifically. What do I bring to this brand? And does what I bring to this brand match up with you guys? And do my values match up with the brand? And I think over the last 5 years, we've seen a huge transition into potential employees thinking more and more critically about the brands that they work for. Who do you want to align yourself with? What does the brand stand for? Why do they exist? And at Hestra, it was a no-brainer. This is a brand that was founded by Martin Magnuson in 1936 in a little town called Hestra. It still exists in Hestra, and now we're in the fourth generation of the Magnuson family owning the company. We own our own factories. We have master certified glove cutters on staff. All we ever do is build gloves. And so we are privately held. We are not beholden to any stockholder, shareholders, anything like that. And so all of those things are things that are valuable to me. Now, the students listening, these may not be things that are valuable to you, right? You may value other things. Other companies are bigger, have bigger teams, have more specialized positions. And so if you're really into copywriting, if you're really into photography, if you're really into something and you want to pursue that vocationally, then find a company who gives you that opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, I wear a lot of hats. I enjoy the dynamic nature of my job. And I know in the long term, it's going to suit me really well to be well-versed in a lot of different things. I want to run a marketing department at some point. I want to grow into certain roles. And so knowing that early on, Chris at Trango pulled me aside and he was like, I see this leadership potential in you. And I want you to remember never to pigeonhole yourself into one thing or another. And that doesn't mean don't over specialize. That means always having a broader perspective. And so I've always kind of sought to make those connections across the office, across the brand, even into the headquarters in Europe, and figuring out what at a higher level, what are the powers that be and the brands I work for thinking about, and what matters to them, and how can I influence those things in my role now and moving forward, right?
Right. You kind of beat me to the punch. I was going to ask you a little bit about the value of, going and becoming a specialist at a big company versus being that jack of all trades generalist. And some people might see generalist as like a negative term. I see it as really valuable, right? Being able to do a lot of different things and having knowledge of a lot of different things. You kind of beat me to that, but I also feel that way, right? Like that opportunity to go and get your hands dirty and wear all those different hats and get those experiences versus, some roles at some larger companies that we interact with, you could go and just work on socks, right? It's like, that's the one thing you do, right? Or you're just the material person over this one line of products. And I think there's real value in that. And I want students to go do that if they want to become a specialist and really dive into a certain material or, aspect of product creation. But I think a lot of our students want to be that generalist and have their hands on a lot of different things. And I think if you want to work in marketing, you kind of have to do that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, so one, for your reading list students, I would highly recommend Range, Range, by David Epstein. And it talks about how a lot of the world's biggest problems are not solved by specialists, because being hyper specialized is great and we need specialists. But even those most specialized problems are solved by context and drawing on other knowledge bases, right? And so he talks about, a musician who specializes in a certain instrument gets super siloed. But if you know at a broader spectrum how all of the instruments work together and how you can play this instrument versus that instrument and how they kind of all of the theory behind all of it, then you have the opportunity to be really great at what you do because you have those other things in mind. Or projects and biggest problems in the world have been solved by drawing on things that are completely unrelated, right? And so I think there's this aspect of that that's really important. And the book goes into great detail about a lot of different scenarios of problem solving and how having range is important. That doesn't preclude, and this is a caveat, like that doesn't preclude specialty, right? Like if you are building socks, then you need to know about how people use socks, why people use socks, their field experience. You need to have the empathy to step into those people's socks, if you will, and understand all the things you're putting those products through. But also on the other side of the equation, it's okay, well, given those needs of those users, how do I connect that with a product that helps them? And so what pieces go into that product, what production processes, what materials, what new things, coatings, all of those things are going to help create that downstream product that really changes the game for that person in that activity. And so I think it's more about giving yourself context and drawing on knowledge from every part of what you do. And so like in my job as an example, we do a lot of B2B work. So wholesale specialty is really the core of what we do. And so I'm always on the phone with our retailers saying, what do your users want? And what in the scope of your marketing and your messaging as a brand, as a retailer, your location, what makes sense for your people? And how do I provide you the resources to solve those problems that they're coming in with? And going to our athlete team and what problems do they have, and really trying to draw on everyone's collective experiences to solve problems across the board through the brand spectrum, right?
Right. Totally. No, I love that. And Range that's a book on my list. I need to dive into that. I've read summaries, I've read different quotes from it, and I need to dive into that one. So I love that. So I guess another question specifically about Hestra, I guess how long has the company had a presence in the US? And just for context, I'm curious.
Yeah. So it's an interesting story, and I think Hestra is really good at staying true to themselves. And so, like I said, Hestra was founded by a small family in a small town. They came to the US about 17 years ago. And when they did that, they met Todd Katz, who is now the head of our dress division. And he's got an office in our New York showroom. So he runs all of the fashion side of our business. So Hestra kind of has three silos. So the fashion side, the sports side, which is what we're primarily talking about, and then the job side. So we do work gloves as well. So Todd started kind of the distribution arm, or at that point, I think we were kind of transitioning into a US headquarters here in the Front Range of Colorado. And then after a couple of years, he moved on and handed it off to Dino Dardano, who's our president today. Well, Dino's background is in family business. So almost from the time Dino could walk, he was in family business. His family, Dardano's Shoes, they have these locations all across the Denver area. They've done a lot of different things. They do shoe repair. They've really evolved over the course of his lifetime. And so family business means family business. And it's just like we found this kind of US extension of our heritage and what we do and what we're dedicated to. And so I really love that story, because I think we talk about working for brands, and I really feel like at Hestra, our task is not to work here, but it's to steward the brand into the next generation and the next iteration, right? So we're now in generation 4 in Sweden. Generation 5, we got a bunch of little babies running around the office over there who at some point are going to be my boss, and I'm stewarding this brand for them, and I'm pushing this brand into the next generation. So we're really keen on long-term thinking, right? Like sustainability. and the longevity of the brand and doing things the right way, having our own factories and be able to source our own materials, being able to design our own gloves and not share those with anyone else in the industry is really important to us, and keeping the craft of glove making alive, even to that granular level. And so all of that is kind of pushed down to the micro level of the US and our following here. So we operate like a small family. Sometimes we fight like a small family, but if you're in our offices here, we have a beautiful headquarters in Arvada. So I can see downtown from one window, the mountains from the other. And it's always a good way to be mindful of the fashion side of the brand as well as the sports side of the brand. But if you're here, you see the bees buzzing around the hive. You know, we've got 12 full-timers in the front office, plus our warehouse staff and our seasonal staff. And it's like one big happy family here. So we really like to mirror what Sweden does here in the US. And I think we've done a pretty good job.
I was going to say, does it sound like kind of like a startup? I mean, you're building a business in the US, but you have the backing of a, you know, almost 100-year-old company over in Sweden. Yeah. I mean, does it kind of have that flavor but you have the stability of a company that's been around for a long time?
Yeah, in some regards it does, you know, so the dress side of the business hasn't been around as long. And so we really operate each line differently. So right now, you know, sport leads the way, and sport is what people know us for. And it's where the core of our product line and our revenues come from. And so I spend probably 80% of my time really focused on how do we grow sport, but also how do we bleed the lines a little bit between sport and the other silos, and how do we take the credibility we have in sport, which is really born out of glove making expertise and doing things kind of from a manufacturing perspective and a sourcing perspective and a design perspective the right way. How do we take those levels of expertise and the level of expertise in sport and kind of push that into these other silos, right? I think a lot of times when we start talking about sport gloves and ski gloves, outdoor gloves, all those things, people in the dress world, their eyes light up because they're like, you guys, you have this level of credibility within these other spaces. And so we do bring that to the table when we talk about sport and we talk about job, our work gloves. But it's like a startup. You're in a completely different industry, right? You're trying to build credibility and get the, you know, it's boots on the ground, right? How do we connect with the right people? Who are the movers and the influencers in this industry who can really be good partners for us and align with what we do really well? And so for the dress side, that looks very like PR forward. And so we just hosted a PR showroom specifically for Hestra, and we invited 850 media members to that just to try to pump up the brand. And luckily, we've gotten placements in Esquire and Gear Patrol and all of these GQ, all these really big mainstream reputable media outlets from that. But I don't do that on the job side. And the job side is about how do we get partnered up with the right brands who gloves are a complement to what they do, and finding partners who are true to what we do in the same space and building together with that and using credibility through partnership rather than through PR. And so it's a really interesting dynamic. But yeah, those two sides of the business really are more startup centric, trying to get that flywheel turning right to that point of traction. And that's a fun change of pace for me.
Well, you know that I love everything outdoor history and heritage. You've been following our archival initiatives, which, by the way, we've got to get Hestra involved in that at some point, considering your history. But I'm curious, in a role in marketing, like, do you feel tied down by having all this history heritage, or is that empowering to have, you know, all of this back catalog to tap into? And you know, you don't have to manufacture almost 100 years of history, right? That's impossible to do. I'm kind of leading you along here, but I guess what is that feeling, having, you know, almost 100 years, you know, backing you up?
Yeah, I think it's all about perspective, right? So for a lot of heritage brands, I think they stagnate at certain points because there is this rich history and there's a story that needs to be told. And that is great. But I think if you just get in the mode and the transactional mode of like, we just tell a story, this is just who we are, then you really start to kind of rest on your laurels and you say, okay, well, this is what got us here, so we're just going to keep doing that, right? And at Hestra, I think the balance we have to strike is, you know, whenever I go to the headquarters in Sweden, there is a room full of archives. And I've actually been lucky enough to put on some of the first gloves we ever made on my hands and to feel the quality there and to see gloves that were made in the 30s and that still could be worn today. I mean, they sit in the vault right now, but I could put them on and I could go work in them right now and they would hold up. And so the reality is about how you frame and use that heritage, right? And so for us, the heritage is this level of expertise in the lessons we've learned along the way, rather than just a story to be told. And so for us, I always tell our team, like, we have 1 foot in the future, 1 foot in the past, right? Because we wouldn't be here without that past. And with all those really credible and conscientious decisions that were made, that's why we are where we are. So you can't deny that. You can't, you don't want to hide those things. But at the same time, we're not sitting back and saying like, well, we're not producing anything new. We're not using new materials. We're not doing anything that is counter to what we've done in the past. I think you always have to keep that momentum and that trajectory moving in a direction that matches the values of the people you're seeking to serve. And for us over the last few years, look at alpine touring and backcountry touring. Like, it has exploded, especially through COVID. And you've got people who have a uniquely different set of needs for their gloves. And if we were to say, oh, well, you could just use the same gloves for that, then we're not serving the people we came to serve. And we're not using all of that history to build something that is suitable for those people. So our touring line has gotten extensively bigger over the last couple of years, and we continue to grow that. And so the question is always, what next? But that what next is paired with the knowledge born out of 85 years of asking that same question and trying to figure it out. And failure is a good thing. And that's one thing. Students, like, listen to me when I say this. You're going to fail. You're going to fall on your face sometimes, and it's how you use that moving forward that dictates your success in the long run. Take those lessons, put them in that catalog, that mental catalog that you have, and use those things moving forward, learn from it, grow from it. And that's how, as a brand, how you have to operate, no matter how long your heritage is, right? Use a lesson you learned yesterday or last week and push it forward, and you have this base that keeps growing, right? And we're lucky to have an 85-year deep base of failures and successes to draw on. I think that's a really unique place to be.
No, that's awesome. That's great. You mentioned, I mean, looking forward, with that said, where do you see kind of your, I guess, your role within the industry moving? Like, what changes do you see? We could talk about changes in platforms, TikTok, on the rise, taking over. We could talk about platforms and tools. But I think there's big changes that are just hitting the industry, right? Like, talking even more about values when it comes to marketing, living those values, not just talking about them. What big changes do you see? What's the future of kind of marketing in the outdoor industry? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it's simultaneously like very encouraging and very daunting to be a marketer in the industry right now. And when we talk about platforms, I always go back to this question, and the question is, what messages are being conveyed, and what platforms are the people who receive those messages on, and can we convey our messages to the people who need to hear our messages well through this platform? Are we set up to do that? And there's a lot of layers to that, right? Do we have enough people to accommodate that, right? Do we have, if there are now 50 social media platforms that we need to be on, is it productive or counterproductive for us to be on those? And to what degree, right? And are we as a brand saying we're going to do that? Or are we going to say, hey, that's not really who we're trying to be, and we want to make sure that we are doing the best by our users, and the most of our users are on this platform doing this thing, right? And so I think you have to be really careful about that creep of platforming and softwares and all those things. I get hit up every single day, multiple times, by people trying to sell me some new platform that does this new thing and all the above. And at the end of the day, how much bandwidth do I have, and does it make sense for our brand and what we're trying to accomplish? And at a broader scale, the values of the world are changing. COVID, Black Lives Matter, DEI, all of these things, sustainability and climate change. I was on a call with the SIA yesterday about climate change. And just as a caveat, if you were a student and you were looking to get into an industry, seek out resources through the SIA, through Outdoor Industry Association. There are so many good resources that they are putting out right now. It's unbelievable. Those guys are doing a fantastic job of equipping the next generation of leaders in our industry, and reach out to those organizations, because they have tons and tons of stuff. We were walking through like role playing scenarios and things around climate change yesterday. And I think what it boils down to as marketers is we are now like feet to the fire, right? You have to go back to your brand and the powers that be at your brand and say, what are we all about? And where are we putting our money where our mouth is, right? And what does it mean for us to be an inclusive brand? What does it mean for us to champion climate change? And the days of you just putting a badge on your website or just saying something are over. Action is all that matters. And I love that, because we're not sitting in meetings just saying, oh yeah, well, let's just partner with this organization, just say this thing and just throw some money at it. People and consumers are more and more wanting to buy from brands that they identify with. So what are your consumers doing, and who do they identify with, and what are their values, and how can you come alongside them and build things that are mutually beneficial and things that are going to move the industry and the world forward. And as a microcosm, you talk about inclusivity, and there's this huge push in the snow sports industry specifically to build better representation. You don't see a lot of athletes of color being represented in the industry, and it's not because they don't exist. Don't let anyone tell you that, because they do. And there are phenomenal athletes out there, and there are people who have wonderful stories and are doing everything everyone else is and aren't getting a seat at the table. And so our job is to be able to give those people a seat at the table. And what happens when we do that? You know, at the end of the day, bringing more people into the fold is a wonderful thing, and it's a wonderful opportunity. And I see this as such an encouraging moment for us, and an inflection point where I can look back, and before I would have said like, yeah, I sold ski gloves for a living. And now I get to say, I can actually institute like cultural change in this industry and beyond in my seat, which is so cool. It is so cool. And that's something that is just really taking hold right now. So guys, we have like this incredible opportunity to do something that creates value and that gives people a seat at the table who have never had it. And I'm so excited about that.
I love that. I think, like you said, like more than ever, it seems like as a marketer, you can't be blind to what's happening in the larger world, right? And you have to respond to that, right? And challenge things within your own organization. But I think that's been really revealing this, the last couple of years, especially. But like as a marketer, if you want to work in marketing, you have to know what's happening in the world, right? You can't just live in your own brand and, pump out, marketing campaigns without understanding what's happening in the world. Like you have to be plugged in. Is that ever hard for you? Because you have to kind of always be on and always being plugged into what's going on and mindful of what you're sharing. Is that ever hard for you to like step away and not be plugged in all the time?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm the only marketing person here in the US, so I am doing a little bit of everything. And so there are times of the year where it is very hard to pull my head out of the sand of, okay, I've got to get these ads created. I've got to source these photos. I've got to cut this video. I've got to make these partnership decisions. I've got to figure out where we are in relation to budgets. And there's a lot of head down stuff that can happen, right? And so the challenge for me is always, how do you pick your head up and make sure that the ship's going in the right direction when you are your head down in all of the day-to-day stuff. And the beauty of it is that I am more and more seeing this as an opportunity, right? And I think a lot of marketers, the tendency is when your head down and something else gets put on your plate, it's like, oh, here we go again, like just more stuff for me to do. But the beauty of the things we're experiencing right now in this transition is seeing the value and that and the opportunity that we have in that, and our potential to have a role and bringing new voices to the conversation and to really influencing the trajectory of an entire industry and an entire culture and those around us. And so I think every time I have those thoughts, I have to stop myself and say, you know what, like this opportunity is amazing, and you have a really good chance to bring more folks into the conversation, and that's always a good thing. And yeah, it can be messy, and I think as an aside, a lot of the brands in the industry and in the world right now are, specifically in the US, are trying to figure out and are gun shy around addressing some of these big issues that we're facing, right? With climate change, with sustainability, with COVID restrictions on how you operate your business, with DEI. how do you as a brand reconcile all of those things with your values? But at the end of the day, there's this huge opportunity to see the long term. And again, I go back to the long term view, right? What does it look like 5 years from now? And how will our industry be new and kind of renewed through this? And how can we just completely change the way we do business for the better? And I don't think we've had that opportunity in quite a while. And so it's really awesome to be a part of that evolution right now. And we have to see it as opportunity to create more and more value for our brands and for our customers. Right?
Along those same lines, you know, a lot of what you're talking about, these are like internal conversations, right? It sounds like there's debates within organizations, within teams. Like you're, you know, trying to be very intentional about what you do as a company, as a brand. Sometimes after a long day of, you know, when I'm working and I don't feel like I, you know, produced anything or posted that day or whatever it might be, like some kind of physical representation of work, I sit back and think, did I work today? But I feel like more and more I realize that like students getting into this industry will realize that a lot of your work is like having these conversations, and it's a lot more of your work is like strategy and discussions and debates and being like trying to be intentional about the decisions that you're making more than sometimes like the decision being made. Does that make sense? Sometimes maybe that's a personal issue that I'm working through is sometimes I feel like, what did I do today? But it's like, no, we made some huge strides when it came to like discussing this as a program and making decisions and moving forward. And, you know, deliverables will come from that. But do you ever find yourself doing that? It's like, wow, I just like had conversations today and talked about where we're going. Sometimes that doesn't feel like work, but it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's kind of two facets to that. So the first is that work is evolving. And through COVID and through all of the technological evolutions and all of the things we're seeing, work does not look like it used to, right? There are a lot of automations and a lot of efficiencies that we've built in over the years, and we haven't accounted for that in terms of how we view our work. And so never hesitate to have that conversation. You know, I was downstairs, so we have 2 levels here. I'm on the 2nd level. And I was downstairs talking to some of our dealer services folks this morning, and one of them, you know, stopped me and said, "Hey, you know, I really appreciate you coming down and having these conversations with us because it makes us feel like a team. And now I am more informed, and I, as Drew, am more informed having heard from them and having those connection points." And so, you know, never underestimate the power of conversation. And I am a lifelong learner. I'm married to an educator, and we talk about this all the time. Like, how do you continue to learn throughout life and have this growth mindset and saying, I'm never done learning. The one thing that you can never stop doing is learning, right? Like there's always more to learn. There's always learning is infinite. Your capacity may be limited and all of these other things may be limited, but your capacity to learn something new is not. And so at the end of the day, you know, never take conversations and those touch points at the office or beyond as not work. And I have done this year. I've tasked myself with some things at the beginning of the year around one, how do I give back? Having been in this industry 10 years, and Chase, you and I talked about this, you know, like I am an open book and I want to share the information that I have and the things I've learned over years, because that moves us forward. And the more we share information, the more we kind of give feedback and kind of riff off of each other, the better and better we get. But the other thing is, in addition to kind of giving, I also want to learn more from people who've been even a step ahead of me or multiple steps ahead of me. So I am the first guy to tell you, I'm on LinkedIn like once a week, you know, trying to find folks who I can learn something from. And I reach out to people all the time, like, hey man, like I'm not looking for a job, but I just want to pick your brain. I respect the work you've done. I respect this thing you did. I saw this thing you did. It's awesome to kind of learn more about that from you. And I'll shout out, you know, Melanie Hood is the marketing manager at Scarpa. We had a conversation last week about DEI and how Scarpa is doing what they're doing as a business who is similar to Hestra. I went into that conversation saying, I don't know where we're going in this. I know we need to be a part of it, and I have some ideas, but I want to like talk through these with you and see what your experience has been. And Lauren Samuels, who's I believe she's a Utah person, so she's been around the state for a long time, but was on the US ski team And she's really spearheading a lot of DEI initiatives in the industry as well. And so it is not uncommon for me to pick up the phone and call Lauren and be like, hey, what about this thing, right? And not being afraid to ask the question. Always ask the question. Always ask the question. I've talked to so many people who are like, no, I can't do that. I can't, I'm not qualified or whatever to ask that person that question. I've had people just completely stonewall me, which is fine, right? But I have always made the habit of being an open book. And that caveat or kind of goes into the other side of the conversation, which is like that work is always like self-propelling, right? And so when you start asking those questions, then you get those answers, and whether the answer is negative, positive, whatever, then it propels you into this next phase of, okay, this works and this doesn't work, and this is now knowledge I have that I can go and put towards my work. And imposter syndrome is a term we hear a lot these days. And if you're in the outdoor industry, you're going to feel it, man. Like you are going to feel it. I was in the climbing industry. I was a very mediocre climber. I am also a very mediocre skier. I am not hugging cliffs, but I love to ski. I'm a good skier. I am not a great skier. I am a good climber. I am not a great climber. And I've spent so much time fretting over that I would be discovered, or whatever the case may be. And that's not my role, right? My role is to understand the sport at a personal level and to be able to connect with the users that exist in those spaces. And so being authentic in that and giving yourself that break and even talking to these people who I respect so much, I'm like, dude, I shouldn't even be able to sit in the same room as you, but I'm going to ask you the question because I've fretted over this message for 2 weeks now. It's sat in my drafts and I'm just going to send it. And there's a lot to be said for that. And I've learned a lot over the years, man. Get out of your own way. There is no imposter syndrome. Ask the question, learn the thing, do it and do it well, and move forward.
That's awesome. That's great advice. I feel like that's probably a good place to wrap it up. We could have a whole part 2 just about that growth mindset, how to reach out to people. That's something that I preach to our students all the time. It's if you're a freshman or first year student in our program and you don't have a LinkedIn account and you're not connecting with all the guest speakers that are coming in that first semester to your intro to product creation class, you got to change that, because we just had the North Face here just last week talking to the students, and that guest speaker gave out his contact information, right? So I'm all about that, trying to not only teach these students how to design and develop products, but how do you build meaningful relationships in the industry so that by the time you graduate, you can jump right into a role and be a part of a team. So we could have a whole nother conversation, because I know you're passionate about that as well. But sure. I guess any parting advice as we kind of wrap up to students who want to break in, anything that we missed?
I don't think there's much that we missed. We could talk for hours on this stuff. I love talking about industry culture and to the students listening, I am happy to be a resource to you. It took me a long time to kind of get into this industry and find my way. And so whatever I know is fair game to you. I am happy to share those things. I'm lucky and blessed and fortunate to be in the position that I'm in, and super grateful to have been here and been able to do the things I've done thus far. We've got a long road ahead of us, but I'm looking forward to getting to know you all. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me there. And just keep head down, learn the things you want to learn, but also don't get siloed into your classes and all those things. Those are important, but also reach out and make those touch points, grab those people's attention, ask the question, always ask the question, never say you can't do something, and always ask the question. Those are my two takeaways here. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time. This has been awesome. And again, we can always do a part 2. There's always a part 2 out there somewhere.
Oh yeah. I'm up for it, man. Let's do it.
Okay. No, sounds good. And hopefully I'll be out at an outdoor retailer show again in the future, and we can meet in person. So
most definitely. Yeah. If you're ever in the Denver area, come by and see us. We are right off I-70. So it's a really convenient spot.
That's awesome. I will next time I'm out there. So thanks again, Drew.